My wife cheated for 8 months and asked for an open marriage. I agreed. Then dated her best friend, documented everything, and left her with no custody, no house, and no friends. I'm 38 years old. I run my own construction company in Denver, and what I'm about to tell you basically destroyed my 12-year marriage, but also, and I know this sounds weird to say it like this, it kind of saved my life in a way. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I met Brenda at this coffee shop near the university, like 15 years ago now, God, time flies. She was studying graphic design. I had just started my construction business, literally had 2 employees and a beat-up truck, and we fell in love in that intense and kind of silly way you do when you're young and you think everything is going to be perfect forever. We got married 2 years after we met. It was a small but nice wedding, and because we were young and stupid and in love, we didn't sign any prenup. I mean, it didn't even cross our minds because who thinks about getting divorced when you're that happy, right? Spoiler alert. I should have thought about it. The first few years were good, honestly, or at least that's what I thought. My business started growing. Brenda worked from home doing designs for some local companies, and then Scarlett came along when I was 26 and Brenda was 24. And 2 years later, Wyatt was born. With the kids being so young, Brenda stopped working completely. And I was fine with that. Like, my company was already making enough money for us to live comfortably and for her to stay home with the kids. Don't get me wrong. I totally respect stay-at-home mothers. It's incredibly hard work, but looking back, I think Brenda got bored, or maybe she felt trapped. I don't know. We never really talked about it until everything exploded. The thing is that for years everything seemed normal, you know? I worked a lot, sometimes 12 or 14 hours a day, because running a construction company isn't fucking easy, and Brenda took care of the house and the kids. We had our routines, our separate but connected lives, and I thought we were happy, or at least that we were. Okay. Then the girls' nights out started. I think it was like 3 years ago, when Scarlett was 7 and Wyatt was 5. At first it was once a month, like normal. Brenda would go out with her friends for dinner or drinks, and I'd stay with the kids. No problem. But then it became more frequent, once a week, then twice a week, and I started noticing weird things. Little things that didn't make much sense but weren't obvious enough to make a scene about either. For example, she'd come home at 2 or 3 in the morning smelling like different perfume, not alcohol or cigarettes like you'd expect after being at a bar, but men's cologne. Though when I asked her about it, she'd say she'd been dancing and there were lots of people. Or her phone. Suddenly it was like Fort Knox, always screen down, always password protected, and if it rang when I was nearby, she'd practically jump to grab it. She started dressing up more for these outings, like full makeup, new clothes I hadn't seen before, heels she never wore with me, and when I'd say, "Hey, you look amazing," she'd just smile and say, "Thanks, babe, see you later," and leave trailing that expensive perfume I'd bought her for our anniversary. What really made me suspicious was one night like a year and a half ago, she had gone out again with the girls, or so she said, and I was putting Wyatt to bed, and the kid asked me, "Dad, why does Mom go out so much now?" And something about that innocent question broke my heart because I realized that even my 6-year-old son had noticed something was wrong. I told him something like, "Mom's just spending time with her friends. It's okay." But that night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about all the signs I'd been ignoring, basically convincing myself I was being paranoid and jealous for no reason. But intuition is a powerful thing, you know? And mine was screaming at me that something wasn't right. So I did something I never thought I'd do. Something I know is technically wrong, but that I needed to do to keep my sanity. I waited for Brenda to shower after one of her nights out and I checked her phone. I knew her password because I'd seen her put it in 1,000 times without her realizing it. Those swipe patterns are easy to memorize if you pay attention, and what I found literally took my breath away. Messages. Hundreds of messages with a guy named Nicholas. And they weren't exactly friend messages. They were explicit, graphic, planning meetups, talking about what they'd done the night before, what they wanted to do next time. There were photos. I'm not going to go into details, but let's say they weren't the kind of photos you send to a friend. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, I sat on the edge of the bed with that phone in my shaking hands, literally shaking, feeling like I'd been hit in the stomach with a baseball bat, and Brenda came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, saw me with her phone and her face. God, her face went from shock to fear in a second. I asked her, "Who the fuck is Nicholas?" And she tried to grab the phone from me, but I stood up, showed her the messages, the photos, everything, and I said, "How long? How fucking long have you been doing this?" She sat on the bed and started crying. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd just been caught and didn't know how to get out of it. She told me she was sorry, that she hadn't wanted it to happen, that she'd just met Nicholas at a bar during one of her actual outings with the girls like 8 months ago, and things just happened. 8 months. 8 fucking months. Living a lie, sleeping with another guy, and then coming home to me and our kids like nothing. I asked her if she loved him, if she was going to leave us for him, and her answer left me speechless. She said, "No, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to break up our family. But Derek," and here comes the part I still can't believe, she said, "what would you think about us having an open marriage?" I just stood there staring at her like she'd grown another head. Like, did you just propose an open marriage after cheating on me for 8 months? And she kept talking, saying that lots of people do it now, that it can work, that she still loves me but also has feelings for Nicholas and she's not ready to leave him, that this could save us, that we could still be a family, but with more freedom. I don't know what happened to me in that moment. Something in my brain shifted. Instead of exploding or throwing her out of the house right then, I got very quiet, very calm, and I said, "Let me think about it." She seemed surprised. I think she expected me to yell at her or cry or beg her to leave Nicholas. But I just said, "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll talk tomorrow," and I left. I spent that whole night awake. Not thinking about Nicholas or the betrayal. Well, yeah, thinking about that, but more than anything, thinking about my options, about my kids, about my business, about how to protect what I'd built. See, something you learn when you run a construction company is that sometimes you need to do strategic demolition before you can build something new. And that night, I decided I was going to demolish this marriage in the most strategic way possible. If Brenda wanted an open marriage, I was going to give it to her, but on my terms. The next morning I told her, "Okay, let's do it. But with rules, nothing in our house, always use protection, and the kids can't know anything about this until we decide what to do long term." She was ecstatic, literally ecstatic. She hugged me and said this was going to work, that we'd be happier. And I just nodded, thinking about my plan. The first thing I did, and this was like 2 days later, was hire a private investigator, a guy one of my clients had recommended to me, years ago for employee background checks. I told him I needed complete documentation of my wife's activities, photos, videos, records of where she went, who with, how long she was away from home, everything. I also hired a divorce attorney, not just any attorney, but one of the best in Denver. And I explained the situation, told him I had evidence of infidelity, but that she'd proposed an open marriage, and I'd accepted, and I asked him how I could use this to my advantage in an eventual divorce, especially for custody of the kids. My lawyer, a guy named Richard who was like 60 years old and had seen everything, told me that Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, which means infidelity doesn't matter much for asset division, but that it absolutely matters for custody if I can prove it's affecting her ability as a mother. So that's what I did for the next few months. I documented everything. Every time Brenda went out with Nicholas, the investigator followed her, took photos of them at hotels, at restaurants, kissing in parking lots, everything. But more importantly, I documented how her outings affected our children. I started keeping a detailed journal, noting every time she missed a school event because she was with Nicholas, every time she left the kids with a babysitter to go away for the weekend with him, every time she came home late and tired and couldn't help with homework or put the kids to bed. I also started getting much more involved in Scarlett and Wyatt's lives, not because it was part of the plan. Well, initially, yes, but later, because I genuinely realized how much I'd been missing by working so much. I started leaving work early to take Scarlett to her gymnastics classes. I spent evenings helping Wyatt with homework. I cooked real dinners instead of ordering takeout. And you know what? My kids flourished with the attention, and I felt more connected to them than I had in years. Brenda barely noticed. She was so wrapped up in her affair with Nicholas that she'd practically handed me the primary parent role without realizing it. And I accepted it gladly because I knew all of this was going to help me in court. It sounds cold when I say it like that. I know, but it was also genuine. I wanted to be there for my kids, and the fact that it also helped me strategically was a bonus. During this time, probably like 3 or 4 months after the open marriage started, I got a text message from a number I didn't know. It was Monica, Brenda's best friend, or at least she had been before all this, saying, "I need to talk to you. Can I see you somewhere without Brenda knowing?" We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, and Monica told me she felt horrible for not telling me anything before, but that Brenda had told her about Nicholas and about the open marriage, and that she thought I was a saint for accepting it, but didn't think it was fair to me. She told me that Brenda had been lying about many of the girls' nights out, that often it was just her with Nicholas or with an excuse to see him, and that Monica didn't want to be complicit in that anymore. I thanked her for telling me, though honestly I already knew all that thanks to the investigator, but what happened next was completely unexpected. We started talking more. Monica and I, at first just as friends. She was recently divorced, no kids, worked in marketing for a tech company, and had this vibrant energy that Brenda had lost years ago. We texted, we met for coffee, and eventually, like 2 months after that first meeting, we started really dating. Technically, I was in an open marriage, so I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I recognized there was something deliciously ironic about dating my wife's ex-best friend. Monica understood what was happening with my kids. She never pressured me to see each other at times that would interfere with my time with them, and honestly, she made me feel like a human being again, and not just an ATM or a functional single dad. We kept our relationship discreet for a while, but eventually, like these things always happen, Brenda found out. It was like 5 months after we started. I'd taken Monica to a nice dinner at a downtown restaurant. Nothing crazy, but something nice because she deserved more than hidden coffee shops. And it turned out Brenda was there with Nicholas. What a huge coincidence, right? We saw each other across the restaurant, and it was the most awkward moment of my life. All 4 gazes connecting, everyone knowing exactly what was happening. I thought Brenda was going to be rational about it. After all, she'd been the one who proposed the open marriage. She'd been fucking Nicholas for almost a year already. But oh no. When I got home that night after dropping Monica off at her apartment, Brenda was waiting up for me, and she was furious. She yelled at me about how dare I go out with her best friend, that it was betrayal, that it was different, and I just laughed, literally laughed in her face, because the hypocrisy was so absurd I couldn't help it. I told her, "Brenda, you've been fucking a stranger for a year, you proposed the open marriage, and now you're angry because I'm seeing someone. Do you seriously not see how ridiculous that is?" She said, "It was different because Monica was her friend," and I responded, "Monica's not your friend anymore. She stopped being your friend when she decided she didn't want to be part of your lies anymore. And besides, you broke this marriage long before I met Monica." The fight was intense. Probably the kids heard us even though we tried to keep our voices down. And in the end, she went to the bedroom, and I stayed in the guest room where I'd been sleeping since that first night months ago. But here comes the part I didn't see coming. Turns out Nicholas, the guy Brenda had risked her marriage and family for, lost interest when things stopped being an exciting secret. I think it was like 2 weeks after the restaurant incident. Brenda was home more often. She wasn't going out as much anymore, and one night I found her crying in the kitchen. I asked her what was wrong, not because I cared about her relationship with Nicholas, but because I needed to know what was happening in my own house. And she told me Nicholas had broken up with her, that he said things had gotten too complicated and he wasn't ready to be a stepfather or deal with all the drama. I mean, the guy was perfectly fine fucking a married woman while it was a dirty secret, but when the situation became real and complicated, he ran like the coward rat he was. Part of me felt sorry for Brenda in that moment, seeing her there devastated by a guy who clearly never really loved her, but the bigger part of me, the part that had been accumulating evidence and waiting for the right moment, knew this was my moment. I waited a couple of weeks, let Brenda process her breakup, and then I told her we needed to talk about our future. I told her that the open marriage clearly wasn't working, that we weren't happy, that the kids were suffering even though we tried to hide it, and that I thought we should get divorced. She was shocked. I think somehow she thought that when things with Nicholas ended, we could just go back to how things were before. But I made it clear that was never going to happen. I told her I'd hired a lawyer, that I was going to file divorce papers, and that I was going to fight for primary custody of Scarlett and Wyatt. She went pale, asked me how I thought I'd win custody when she'd been a full-time mother for years, and I simply told her I had my reasons, and she'd see. I filed the divorce papers the following week. It was in February of this year, so like 8 months ago now, and the process was exactly as my lawyer Richard had predicted. We presented all the evidence from the private investigator, months of documentation showing Brenda with Nicholas at hotels, proof that she'd spent money from our joint account on gifts for him, receipts from expensive restaurants and trips. But more importantly, we presented the journal I'd been keeping, showing every school event Brenda had missed, every time she'd left the kids with babysitters to be with Nicholas. Testimonies from the kids' teachers saying I was the one attending all the parent-teacher conferences now. Records showing I was the one taking the kids to their medical appointments and extracurricular activities. We also had Monica testify, which was dramatic because she testified about conversations she'd had with Brenda, where Brenda had admitted she was more interested in her relationship with Nicholas than in her responsibilities as a mother. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that the open marriage had been mutual, that she still loved her children, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge, a woman in her 50s who had probably seen thousands of divorce cases, was very direct. She said that while Colorado doesn't penalize infidelity in terms of asset division, it was clear that Brenda had been negligent in her parental duties and that the children would be better off with a custody arrangement where I was the primary parent. The final judgment came like 3 months ago. They gave me primary custody of Scarlett and Wyatt. Brenda has visitation every other weekend and one weeknight. And she has to pay a symbolic amount of child support, though it's not much because she doesn't have a job. As for asset division, I had to give her a portion of my business. Not the business itself, but a payment equivalent to what her percentage would be as my wife during those 12 years. And the house was sold and we split the proceeds. It sounds like a lot of money, and it was. It probably cost me like $200,000 total between the payment to her and all the legal expenses, but I kept my business intact. I have my kids, and I'm out of a marriage that had been dead for a long time. Brenda had to get a job. Now she works part-time at a home decor store. Lives in a small apartment, and honestly, I think she's finally starting to understand the consequences of her decisions. The kids are okay. Better than I expected, honestly. Scarlett is 11 now, and Wyatt is 9. And though at first it was difficult explaining to them why Mom and Dad didn't live together anymore, I think they understand we're all happier this way. Monica and I are still together. Things are going slow because we both know there's a lot of baggage here, with her being my ex-wife's ex-best friend and all that drama. But she makes me happy, and that's something I hadn't felt in years. The kids know her as my friend for now. I'm not in a hurry to introduce the concept of girlfriend or whatever. There's time for that. What surprises me most about this whole situation is how free I feel now. Like for years I felt trapped in this marriage that was slowly falling apart without even knowing it. Working like crazy to support a family my wife was actively destroying. And now, even though I'm technically busier because I'm basically a single dad, I feel lighter, more myself. My kids are thriving. My business is better than ever because I stopped using work as an escape and now have real balance. And I have a relationship with someone who genuinely respects and values me. Sometimes I wonder if I should have confronted Brenda differently, if I should have given her a chance to fix things. But honestly, I think the moment she proposed the open marriage, the marriage was already over. We just didn't want to admit it. The other day, Scarlett asked me if Mom and I would ever get back together, and I told her the truth. I said, "Sweetie, sometimes people change and grow in different directions, and that's okay. Mom and I will always love you and your brother, but we're not happy together anymore, and it's okay for us to move forward." She thought about it for a moment, and then said, "It's okay, Dad. I like it better when you're happy anyway. You smile more now." And that simple observation from my 11-year-old daughter made me realize I made the right decision. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, and it definitely wasn't cheap, but it was worth every second of strategic planning, every dollar spent on lawyers and investigators, every night wondering if I was doing the right thing. Because at the end of the day, I built something better from the ruins of my marriage. A life where my kids are happy and safe, where I'm happy and free, and where the future looks bright instead of being this nebulous and scary thing it was before. Brenda made her choice when she decided Nicholas was more important than our family, and I made mine when I decided I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I was going to be the architect of my own rebuilding.